Out of all the years I've been doing this, is the first time you guys applauded. Thank you so much. Who's here first? Scott Duke, 1,000 Pine Points to you. How was my New Year's? It was very good, thank you. Choops K, 500 Pine Points to you. And Aaron D, 250 Pine Points for you. Guten Tag, Guten Morgen to you, Aaron. Hope you guys are having a great morning. I'm going to love this show because you know what I really love? What I really, really, really love? I love it when atheists and Christians can come together. I mean, it makes me want to believe in God when that happens because it happens so rarely. It's like my hard heart softens just a little when that happens. And it's so encouraging to me. I think Christians agree with me here, and Muslims and Mormons and everybody. It's like when we can come together in agreement and for a common goal to try to rid the world of falsities. And this is what I found last night when I was just perusing the internet. I stumbled upon Remnant Radio's YouTube channel, and they did an 8-hour marathon on New Year's Eve day to talk about prophecy, because a lot of Christians will prophesy what will happen in 2021, and so they were reviewing some of it. They had Craig Keener on, and I actually like Craig Keener. I think he's a nice guy. I think he just loves Jesus so much, believes in miracles and so much, believes the Bible's God's word so much. And same with Mike Winger here. By the way, Mike, when you hear this, you're welcome to join me, and we can talk about this. And I want to congratulate you. But let's run through this, and I'll show you exactly where I agree 100% with Mike Winger on the topic of prophecy. Hey, I forgot to do this. If anybody knows Josh, you remember Josh, the Old Testament wizard guy who knows Hebrew and studies the Old Testament. You know who I'm talking about? He's on Skylar's Fiction Show, Josh. If anybody knows his Twitter handle, can you tweet him right now that I'm live? And I might, he's going to get a kick out of this, number one. And number two, he's welcome to come on after I'm done reviewing this, and we can talk a little bit about prophecy.
My name is Mike Winger, and it's all there.
Yeah. So, and do you believe in this stuff? You believe in prophecy?
Yes, I do. I actually, when you guys reached out to me and said, "Hey, we're looking at covering these videos," I told you I had special interest if you had one that looked like it was true, because I do. I'm like interested in seeing people really giving a prophetic word that's legit.
Yes, Dr. Josh Bowen. Oh, okay. Yeah, I can do it myself. He'll probably listen to me before you flag-waving phony live stream viewers. It's like, who's this guy tweeting me? Saying something about Pinecreek? I don't believe it. But if it comes from me, it's like, oh yeah, that Pinecreek? Yeah. I'll take him right now. At Digital Hammurabi, hey, come by my house at Pinecreek. Right by the creek, right by the waters, and listen to this about Mike Winger and prophecy. P.S. Put on clothes just in case. You'll get the message. Okay, there we go. Back to you, Mike.
And you sent me one that on the surface did look kind of true.
And that's why I sent it to you. Yeah. And we'll have to send you some links.
Okay, so what happened here is this guy on the left, he sent Mike Winger a few prophecy video clips for 2021, and they're going to go over it.
Of some stuff that people that I'm close with that operate in prophetic ministry that I feel like oftentimes takes place on a local level. As far as I can tell, prophecy, the normative practice, is a prophetic word that's given amongst a congregation that's being judged amongst that congregation that takes place on a local level.
Raise your hand if you have had someone prophesy over you before. Let me see here. Wow, I see that hand. Yes, I see that hand. There's a lot of people in the live stream chat right now who have raised their hands saying that they indeed have had people in the church prophesy over them before. I have too, when I was a Christian, but I hate to say this, I kind of almost laughed at the guy when he did it. It was hard for me to keep a straight face. And I was a Christian at the time, and I'm just like, no.
A lot of these prophecies that we're seeing, the reason there's error, in my opinion, is they're not for an individual's exhortation, encouragement, that it is actually being used for the nation or for the world. People are operating outside of the prescribed guidance that we see in 1 Corinthians. And yeah, we've talked about that quite a bit with some of the other guys.
I mean, personally, I don't necessarily have a problem with somebody having a word for a nation. I just want to know that they have a track record with individuals.
But again, I'm using
a word for a nation. Wow. What would a very testable word for a nation look like that you can say, this is just not something that would have happened anyhow?
the words prescribed and like prescriptive and descriptive on purpose, because I think when someone says, hey, how do I heal? Like, how does our church practice praying for the sick and healing the sick? We'd say James chapter 5 talks about anointing with oil, pray the prayer of faith, they recover their sight. But then they go, but if they're blind, don't we pick up mud, spit in it, and throw in some guy's eyes? Well, no, that's a descriptive.
What's he talking about? Spinning, making mud. Oh, yes, that's what Jesus did to heal someone who was blind. A lot of people forget about verses like that.
Text describing what happened. It's not a prescriptive text. Now, is it possible that there would be an odd or unusual means by which God performs a miracle? Absolutely. But we want to use the prescriptive text as the main focus and say that it's possible for God to do something else.
Right.
Because we see that in
what you're saying,
narrative text.
Yeah. So when Paul's giving instructions about prophecy, 1 Corinthians chapter 14, he's giving instructions in a local church context. And you're saying that's where we really want our focus to be. On the other hand, if in the book of Acts, which is more descriptive, you have an Agabus giving a sort of global...
I'm going to try as hard as I can not to say anything negative, derogatory, mocking, attacking. I'm going to, for the first half of this video at least, do nothing but praise and adulation.
Whole type of word that you would have space for that, but it seems like the working norm would be for inside the local assembly.
It seems as if we've turned it on its head. And
yes,
Mike,
I'm sorry, Mike. We're back to you.
We're like chatting like you're not there.
Yes, like Mike is there waiting in the wings. You got this person who wants to talk. Let Mike talk.
That seems like the...
Oh, that was sort of negative. Oh, I apologize.
The normative practice right now is we've turned that on its head. We've made the Agabus kind of prophecy the norm, when I really think it's the other way around.
Yes,
what should be normative should be taking place in local churches. You got any thoughts on that, Mike?
I find it all fascinating and very interesting. And I want to make sure that...
Yes, this is an 8-hour stream, but I'm only going to play like 20 minutes of it because it's really good. It's like an atheist and a Christian... Atheists and Christians are going to come together today in unity. This is so exciting.
And this is a serious danger in that evaluating problematic teachers, that you end up losing the baby with the bathwater. You end up discounting all teaching, or all, you look at a bad pastor and so then now you don't trust any pastors. You look at a false prophecy, so now you don't trust anything where someone could say, I think the Lord's telling me to give you this or share.
Yes, exactly right. You don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. You hear some stupid things Richard Dawkins say, and then you say, oh, see, look how, with you. And I don't want to fall into that, because it's hard to deny the reality of prophecy on Scripture. Like, it's hard to deny it wholesale. And so I need to continue to be open to those things. Yeah. I'll save a comment about that for later.
That's right. Okay, that's good, man. Well, let's watch this video. I want to get your thoughts on it. I shared the video because I think, hey, this seems pretty compelling. You've sent me some articles that made me really question it.
So you sent it thinking it was maybe true.
I sent him 2 different prophetic words that I was like, he wants something that looks real. Like, I searched 80 hours to find some good stuff. sending this
You're
to him
getting-
thinking,
Okay, this is very important to take note of. The Christian on the left searched 80 hours for, I think, the best prophecies he could find and sent a couple of them to Mike, is what I'm hearing him say. This is very important. Got a Christian on the left searching for like 2 weeks on the best prophecies from other Christians, sent it to Mike, and Mike's going to destroy it in every way that I agree with. Now, what does that say about the Christian on the left? What does that say about prophecy in general?
This is the cream of the crop, Mike.
this is it.
The cream of the crop.
Don't crush my dreams, Mike.
Crush his dreams, Mike. I'm going to be nice to Mike and not so nice, I guess, to the guy on the left. No, Mike, I want you to crush his dreams. Because I'm your ally. I'm on your side, Mike, on this one.
I'm going to play this
I will be
video.
your dream crusher.
I'm going to play this video, and in the footage, your mic's going to be muted. If you want to give me like a hey, pause it, I can pause it and unmute you for commentary. So
You know
just
what?
let me know.
We'll let it play straight through. But I just want to tell everybody listening, like, really listen for the specific, like, prediction parts of.
Listen to the very specific prediction parts. I can't agree with that more. In fact, I got to rewind that.
Commentary. So
You
just
know
let
what?
me know.
We'll let it play straight through. But I just want to tell everybody listening, like, really listen for the specific, like, prediction parts of the prophecy, because a lot of times it's a lot of filler language in there. So what are the things he's predicting, and then give us the date of when this happened, and you'll see how on the surface this does sound really good. And then I'd like to go over it with a bit more of a critical.
Okay. Yeah.
Yes. Really listen to the predictions and how specific they are. And I mean, this is I'm putting the laugh track in there. No, it's not a laugh track. The applause track on purpose, because I wish I see, but if I clap too loud, then people's ears start to hurt if they have earbuds in. So I'm doing it the other way. But I can't agree more.
This is the second word that we've reviewed by a man by the name of James Gall. So let's check it out.
James Gall? Okay. Number one, I just got to be honest here. I tend not to trust bald people. And I see two bald people there. Maybe even the third person over here is bald and wearing a wig. Don't look at every movie. The evil people are bald. People want me to shave my head, but I just don't want to look evil.
Who had a vision or a dream about the president. Yes. Do you want to share that? I said you do it today, so let's make sure we get it in right now.
Let's go for it. So I have a lot of dreams. So it's not the only, but it's one of the primary ways that the Holy Spirit speaks to me is in dreams and in visions or visitations. So
God visits him through dreams, visions, and visitations.
it was after he had been elected. Now, I could talk before he was elected, but that's not the purpose of this, because I need to give you a word of encouragement and a call to prayer concerning the Supreme Court of the United States of America. After there was the first replacement, of which was a righteous judge that President Trump then appointed to the court, then there was the big battle with Kavanaugh's appointment, and many were like uncertain. Are they going, yes, this is right, and this thing? So I'm at the
Don't forget Mike Winger's advice. Listen to the prophecies, the future predictions that this man's going to give.
before the Lord, asking God, what's your plan? That night, the Lord visited me, and I heard the following. He said, President
The Lord visited him. I'm just very curious how many Christians believe that.
Trump, by the way, I need to put a qualifier. We hear in part, we know in part, and even the best only prophesy in part, and that's why we need each other to bring our parts.
Oh, Digital Hammer Robbie, thank you for being here. I don't know if you've heard this before. Let me know in the live stream chat if you heard this before. But I don't know how to warn you. I don't know how to soften the blow. But Josh, you're going to love this. I know the love for your wife and your children is here. There's a chance that after watching this video, this will surpass that love. I don't want to overstate this, but I think I just did.
Together, then we see the greater puzzle of the whole. So I heard from the Lord, President Trump is appointed to put in place 3 new judges. to the Supreme Court. And he spoke to me about Kavanaugh, that he was critical. It would be one of the greatest fights in spiritual warfare over an appointment for the Supreme Court that we've ever had in history. But it would go through.
By the way, I'm not speeding this up. Remnant Radio sped it up. I have this at 1x, as you can see.
But there would be a third appointee that President Trump is assigned to bring. He told me it would be a woman. She will be a modern day Esther. She will stand strong for pro-life, and she will help for the future to return the court. This is the word of what I heard from the Lord, to true constitution.
Okay, this is the prediction part, that there'd be a woman Supreme Court justice appointed. I think that's so far the only prediction he's made.
Conservatism.
Yes, praise God. That's what we have to have. Thank you.
Now, how long ago did this vision come to you?
So this would have been, a year and a half to 2 years ago. And then, but it went past the, Kavanaugh's appointment. I saw the warfare around it, but that if we would pray.
Happened 1 to 2 years ago, but went past the Kavanaugh appointment. So that makes it sound like it's an ongoing vision, revelation, visitation, prophecy that continued on past the Kavanaugh thing.
He would come through, but then it deals with another appointee. And so here's what I want you to understand. Now, I just came from a group of leaders just last week in Washington, D.C.
He just came from Washington, D.C. That's important.
For the helping birth of a prayer movement, bringing the movements together called One Voice Prayer Movement to pray every week for the executive branch of the government. It's something new that's never happened in the history of this nation. And so I prophesied at Apostle Maldonado's in Miami, and I prophesied that there is going to be the greatest prayer movement for the U.S. government that this nation has ever seen, and there will be intercession.
That's another prediction, that there will be the greatest prayer movement. It's a difficult one to quantify by...
will arise for every cabinet position in every branch of government. Now, I believe that is coming. I'm speaking to that which is not, and I'm calling it as though it already is. And so then in this with President Trump, so when is this going to happen? Does that mean that he's going to win this coming election? I believe it is God's will that he win the 2020 election.
Now, that's not a prediction. He's just giving his opinion, so can't really take this as a prophecy. But he's saying his opinion is that it is God's will that Trump be president. So don't say he's a false prophet just because Trump didn't win. So don't blame him for that. He's just giving his opinion.
Now, but because we are called to be co-laborers with God, there's the providential sovereignty of God, then there's man's free choice.
Yes, he's exactly right. The will of man can supersede the will of God. So his opinion is the will of God is that Trump wins, but the will of man and women and children, no, children can't vote. It seemed like superseded God's will here.
So prayer is voting is the work that is attached to our faith, because faith without corresponding actions, according to the book of James, is dead. So vote.
Yes, in the book of James, I believe it says, thou shalt vote.
Is to our faith for elections, and so it's don't stay home.
That's right.
Invest your faith and exercise your faith by a righteous vote. Vote pro-life.
Yes.
Vote for pro-Israel.
Amen.
Vote for a good trade.
I wonder if the Democratic Party, the majority of the Democratic Party became pro-life, but pro-socialism or even communism, if Christians would switch parties. Ooh, that's a neat idea. I would love to see what Christians would do, evangelical Christians like this would do with that. What would you be willing to become Democrats if Democrats promised to get rid of all abortion and be as even more pro-life than you are, but at a cost? And the cost is we got to switch everything over to communism, like the most pure communism you can think of. Would you take that deal? Oh, that's a great question. Oh, sorry, I shouldn't congratulate myself.
Vote for righteousness. Do this. The Lord showed me that we would, this year, as you have seen, that this would be called the year of the great divide, the year of the great exact polar opposites arising, and be the year of the great divide. But he also spoke to me that there is the...
Okay, so I think that was another prediction, a year of the great divide of huge dichotomy in thought and so forth.
Potential of healing in the midst of the great divide, of which then it'll be the culture of honor is the only thing that could heal the time of the great divide.
Yeah.
But back to President Trump. So will he be reelected? It is, I believe, the Father's will. But we must align with the Father's choice, not our choice, with God's choice.
Watch his hands.
And we must align our works with our faith. Okay, so that's just an issue there. And then so when will this third, I know who is supposed to resign, the Holy Spirit spoke.
My guess is if you were to handcuff him, he couldn't talk.
to me that if this justice, he's going to give this particular justice time to repent. I know who it is. He told me by name. I'm not going to say by air the name of the person. I think you can figure it out. But
Whoa. He's prophesying that a Supreme Court justice will wait as long as possible to resign. He's not going to say who it is, but this is a prophecy. But he also said, you can figure it out who I'm talking about. If we non-prophets can figure out, what's the big deal if a prophet like him can figure it out?
it's time for this particular justice to repent, to come to the Lord.
Yes.
And if they don't, that they will be removed.
Wow.
And the Lord is going to create a vacancy.
Okay, this is a prophecy. The Lord will create a vacancy
On the Supreme Court. Is it going to be in this term or the next one? My belief is that this person is going to hang on, and try to hang on into the next administration, hoping that President Trump is not
Okay, now this is not a direct prophecy, but he's kind of saying that the next Supreme Court justice, or that this Supreme Court justice will hang on until the next term. But he didn't really say it's like a prophecy from God, but his own personal opinion. So let's not fault him for that.
reelected, but God's got a trump card, and there is going to be a woman who is going to be appointed, and she will be an
Oh, this is a prophecy right here. It's going to be a woman that's going to be appointed.
Esther, a modern-day Esther, and she will tip the scales of the U.S. Supreme Court towards constitutional conservatism in Jesus' name.
Wow.
Constitutional conservatism in Jesus' name.
I love it.
Mike, tell me that's not Amy Coney.
Okay, are you sitting down, Josh? Please, I hope you're sitting down because I don't want you to hurt yourself. So this is Mike, and this is going to be Mike and me, and I think probably you agreeing with Mike on the subject of prophecy.
Amy Barrett, come on, bro. Come on.
Well, it is Amy Coney Barrett. Actually, that's the thing. So this was delivered September 13th, 2019. So
That's important. So the bald guy, the evil guy, I'm sorry, I just have a presuppositions against bald people being evil. To September 2019.
I mean, this goes back quite a ways, right? And in this thing, he's like, "Hey, look, we're going to have one more person, put into the Supreme Court by Trump. It'll be a woman. She'll be pro-life. She'll be a constitutional conservative." Like, these are really specific predictions. But here's one clue, a key moment you may have missed. He said about who it was, "I think you can figure it out." Yeah! Josh, why do you think? He thinks you can figure out who this person's supposed to be, even back in 2019, even before, it had happened.
Now, it sounded to me as if, and I might have misheard the quote, it sounded as if he was saying the person that was going to be removed, you could figure them out.
That's what I mean, yes.
Okay.
He said, "I think you can figure this out." There's something
he's
key
saying
here.
Because Ruth Bader Ginsburg's old and she's going to die is how I took it.
Yes, that's the idea.
That's
now,
the
why
idea.
is it you can figure it out? Because let me just say this. Here's my word, and I'm going to my word is my prophetic proclamation. No, here's my my thoughts on this, and I'm going to try to build a case for it for you guys. Now, first off, I went into this not knowing what I was going to find, right? And I don't follow politics that much, and so I had to go back and do research to try to figure out what the scenario was when this was given and all that kind of thing. But I think that everything that Gall says is common speculation at the time. Everything he said. And there's even indication that he did not have prophetic foretelling when it comes to the timing of the things that were going on. So Gall's prophecy was, September 13th, 2019. In August, that is the month prior, it had just been announced, and this was all over the news, that Ruth Bader Ginsburg, the Supreme Court Justice, who was 86 at the time, 86, and everyone had been talking about her retirement for a couple of years now. They were expecting it. She was holding on. It was obvious. She's holding on because Trump is president. That's the reason why she's there. But it was just announced that she had a tumor on her pancreas that had just been operated on. She'd received 3 weeks of radiation therapy. And so suddenly there was this new thrust of speculation in the news and in the political environment about her possible soon retirement. She can't possibly just keep going forever. But she said she had no intention of retiring. And it was very clear she was waiting for a new president to come in. Okay,
Let's be very clear what Mike's saying here for the people from what city am I going to pick on? From the people from Dalhart, Texas. Oh, that's a very interesting choice. That just popped in my head. For the people from Dalhart, Texas, what Mike is saying here is this prophecy that there's going to be a Supreme Court justice who will be removed or will leave and create a vacancy, but this Supreme Court justice will postpone it and wait as long as possible. This prophetic word was done after. This is basically almost common knowledge at the time based on news reports. She was sick. She was going through cancer treatments. And in fact, I think, Mike said that she was going to try to wait until Trump was gone. So a Democrat Supreme Court justice, in quotes, could fill. So Mike's basically saying, hey, this is all basically, if it wasn't old news, it was news that could be easily predicted.
See, this isn't prediction. This is all just normal political speculation.
Yes, not prediction. It's normal political speculation.
This is just stuff that's known at the time. This is where James Gall says that she was going to hang on, that he feels like she's going to hang on. Well, that was just what she said. Like, this was in the news, reported from before he ever made this prophecy. There's nothing new there. Now, regarding the Esther thing, there's going to be an Esther. It's going to be a woman. She'll be a constitutional conservative, all those types of things. What we may forget, especially if you're like me and you don't really follow these things with a fine-tooth comb typically, Trump had a track record of appointing conservatives, lots and lots and lots of conservatives, both to the Supreme Court and to other courts. Trump had already released a list of potential candidates. And that was one of the shocking things about Trump, from before he was elected till after, was that he actually did follow through with appointing conservatives to the courts whenever possible. There is actually a CNBC article, and I
look at this research that Mike has done. This is brilliant, Mike. Excellent job.
I've given you guys the link for this, and this is from 8/30/2019. Catch this. This is 14 days before Gall's prophecy. Because my theory is Gall
14 days before the prophecy
was reading the news and then reporting it like it's prophecy. The title of the article is, "With Ruth Bader Ginsburg's health in the spotlight, attention turns to abortion foe waiting in the wings." Here's a quote from the article. "Adding to the anticipation is the possible nomination of Amy Coney Barrett, widely seen as President Donald Trump's most likely next pick." After spending the entire article on Amy Coney Barrett and how she's probably going to be the next person to step in whenever Ruth Bader Ginsburg is gone, they say other nominees are possible, mostly women. So it was extremely likely that a woman was going to be brought in.
Now, for those atheists listening right now, you know exactly what I'm thinking, but I'm going to hold off to say what exactly I'm thinking. And Josh knows exactly what I'm thinking. And Josh is listening to this and he's smiling at Mike and saying, "Oh, Mike, we love you, Mike."
And that it would happen soon because of Ruth Bader Ginsburg's health, and that they would be a constitutional conservative and a pro-life advocate. Like, this is just what was known in the news. Now, that's not the only article. That was 14 days before Gall's prophecy, but this is all over the news. So there was an article that had been circulating for months, from back in April, and this was an article. See,
I just prophesied. I don't know if you guys caught that, and I'm a true prophet. I just prophesied that Dr. Josh Bowen is smiling right now. And in the live stream chat, he says, "I am smiling a lot." He says, "I am the only true atheist prophet on the planet." And I just proved it.
Was going to give Amy Coney Barrett the seat of Ruth Bader Ginsburg in particular. So this was leaked by a news agency called Axios, but then it was also shared on The Hill and Fox News and New York Post and Washington Post, like all over the place. And this basically said, there's an inside report from Washington that specifically Ruth Bader Ginsburg, when she's gone, Amy Coney Barrett is the next person to be put in. Okay, so as far as the prophecy about being like an Esther and being this woman and being pro-life, like that was actually also common knowledge and it was expected at the time. Now let's look at another element of his prophecy. He said that it would be successful, that they wouldn't be able to stop this nomination. She's going to successfully be appointed. So not just given the nomination by the president, but successfully installed. Well, let me give you a quote now from a time.
For those of you who came late, there's one gentleman from the Remnant Radio podcast show, scoured 80 hours. Actually, Josh, you came late, so I'm going to catch you up. Scoured 80 hours looking for Christian prophecy. and he found a few that he thought were the best, and he sent them to Mike, and they're reviewing one of them right now. This is the best Christian prophecy that Mike is tearing apart successfully. Mike, I know some of you might hate the applause, but you're doing a great job here, Mike.
Time news article. This is from 8/28/2019, 16 days prior to Gall's prophecy. And the article says it would be easy to confirm the next appointee. Now, you might think, but wait a minute, there was this big battle over the previous appointee. So how would they know Amy Coney Barrett would make it in? Well, here's what the article says. If Ginsburg's seat does open up, Democrats will have little hope of blocking the nominee. After Senate Republicans eliminated the filibuster for Supreme Court nominees in 2017, the Senate can now confirm a judge to the Supreme Court with a simple majority. With Republicans commanding a 53-47 majority in the upper chamber, they could confirm a nominee without any Democratic support. So they could fight it all they want. It wouldn't.
That's just math. That's just science.
It wouldn't stop her from actually getting the election. There's also an article in the Washington Post by Scott Lemieux, and he's a lecturer in political science at the University of Washington.
Scott is the younger brother of Mario Lemieux, the great hockey player.
This is a article, again, that's from before James Gall's prophecy, just days before. And it says, if Ginsburg's seat were to become vacant before January 20th, 2021, President Trump would almost certainly be able to choose and get confirmed by Republican Senate her replacement. So was Gall aware of the news? Yeah. I mean, he's talking about how he goes to Washington. He's networking with people in Washington. He's giving you, in fact, he thinks you're aware because he says, you could probably guess who I'm talking about, right? Which is like a weird, cheeky thing to say when you're doing prophecy. But then finally, let me say this.
So what Mike's saying is, hey, this guy even admitted he went to Washington, D.C. Is he aware of the news? He's very politically minded and active. He knows what's going on in the world around him. And none of this, in fact, probably all of this, I'll put it in the positive, was like 95% confident would happen.
Gall got wrong. And this is where I would expect somebody to shine if they have something from the Lord here. It's where they start speculating about things that aren't just common knowledge in the news at the time. Here's what he got wrong. He says, the Lord, and I'm going to quote him now, the Lord is going to create a vacancy on the Supreme Court. It's going to be in this. Is it going to be in this term or the next one? My belief is that this person is going to hang on, and try to hang on into the next administration, hoping that President Trump is not reelected, but God's got a trump card. Now, if you guys know, if you've been listening to a lot of these prophecy things, when he says God's got a trump card in that community, it probably means Trump is going to get reelected, so her plan to hang on won't work. My best understanding of Gall's prophecy is that he's implying that Ruth Bader Ginsburg is actually going to be taken out in the following term, in Trump's second term, and then Amy Coney Barrett will be installed. And on a human level,
yeah, but to this Gall guy's defense, he said, "This is what I believe." He didn't say this is a word from the Lord, sort of like what Paul does. This is, you got words from the Lord, and you got Paul's own personal opinion. So maybe this guy didn't really get anything wrong as far as that goes.
Well, that prediction made sense
because he's just given his opinion.
Because this is what it looked like at the end of 2019. Trump looked like he was going to be the next president. Things were favorable for him. 2020 is the reason why he didn't get reelected.
Great point, Mike. There's a really good chance Trump would be president today if COVID wouldn't have come around.
It's the events of 2020, and he was probably going to get reelected, and things were sitting pretty well, and the conservatives were feeling very strong in their positions. So he expected this to happen. Plus, all these other prophets were saying that Trump was going to get 2 terms. Well, it seems that Trump isn't going to get a second term. That's how it seems.
Ooh, Mike just crushed the other prophecies from other Christians. There's still a lot of Christians who think Trump's going to be president.
And she didn't even make it to his.
In fact, some of them are in the live stream chat as Mike's talking.
Second term. So the one thing where he says, I believe this, it seems to be the thing that's inaccurate. Here's this, and I've seen this before. When I've looked at some guys in India making prophecies about weather events, and then I go and I look, and it turns out those weather events were just on the Weather Channel. And they're just counting on their audience not to pay attention to the timing of things.
They're just counting on their audience not to pay attention. That's important. It's easy to make prophecies when you're counting on your audience to not really know what's going on in the world around them.
This is what I see. James Gall is reading the news. He's trying to be informed politically, and then he's presenting normal political speculation as if it's prophecy, and it has about the same accuracy as normal political speculation.
Okay.
He just crushed, not this guy, the other guy.
Well, Mike, thank you so much for that analysis. One question I have is,
yeah, thank you for that analysis,
is really the question of ethics, and that is, do you perceive that James Gall is doing this intentionally? Like, wow, I read all these articles, and so I think that based on news and events that this is probably what's going to happen, and that's the best consensus of Time Magazine and such and such reporters, and then I'm going to put it out there as prophecy. So do you believe that it is intentional, or do you believe that...
Okay, now I want you... do I say this now? No, I'm going to wait.
As he's just naturally absorbing by osmosis all this news, that he really believes he's hearing the Lord and he's sharing that, or maybe a third category there's no way of knowing. So where would you put yourself?
So here's the thought. I get this stuff all the time when I confront a teacher, a problematic teacher, and then the question is like, so do they know they're making stuff up?
Here's another point of agreement or camaraderie. I get the same question a lot too. Doug, do you think this preacher or pastor really believes what they're preaching? Or are they just doing this for the money? It's so funny, actually, how similar people like me and people like Mike can be, and questions we get asked and our responses. Because I think Mike's response is going to be similar to mine.
What's going on? I don't think it's necessarily good for us to speculate too much on that stuff. At least it's not something I enjoy doing. I believe that it's possible for humans to be incredibly self-deceived.
Do I need to applaud that? Incredibly easy for humans to be self-deceived.
So what if Gall's really reading these newspaper things and he's praying while he's reading it, and he feels like God is showing him stuff, right? And he thinks that he's getting discernment from the Lord as he navigates through that stuff. And so that would make his stuff very genuine, very...
Sort of like the Holy Spirit gives you discernment to look at the prophecies within the Bible.
Sincere. But here's the problem. Him being sincere or insincere doesn't do anything about the danger of having a guy like that speaking on behalf of the Lord. Because, like, to me, all that matters is he's wrong, right? Like, that's not the Lord. He's not speaking on behalf of the Lord. I'm going to put him in a new category of people who I cannot trust, who are claiming to speak on behalf of God. Like that.
So if a prophecy is wrong, you cannot trust the author of that prophecy.
That's a huge issue. Whether he's sincere or not is almost like a side question. So I have a tendency, like, sometimes it's hard for me to say that someone's just a liar because I go, oh, is he just lying, or maybe he's just wrong?
Well, I was just asking because I wanted to see if it was accusation about his character, or if you're really you're saying you're just trying to point out some things that are looking a little too consistent.
Yeah, I mean, okay, my guess is this, and I haven't studied James Gall's stuff. I haven't looked at a bunch of his other things, so I could build a stronger, bigger case if I was to spend the time on it, which I am loath to do in this case.
Thank you for the donation, Brandon Cascade. Sorry I'm late. I forgive you. Without any violence, I will forgive you. Is Winger doing his usual, I'm a poor kick puppy routine? No. This whole video is about me and Mike Winger agreeing. In fact, I bet most atheists listening, most non-Christians listening, agree with almost everything Mike Winger is saying here about this bald guy who's probably evil because he's bald. I'm an anti-baldite. Will this video be pulled from YouTube because I'm an anti-baldite? He's saying that this bald guy's just saying stuff that was commonly known at the time, and he was wrong about some of his predictions, or sure seems like he was wrong, at least on some details.
But if based on what I've examined so far, he's definitely, at least tentatively, in this dude's a false prophet category in my head, and I would not trust what he says. Doesn't mean he's insincere, doesn't mean he doesn't have good motivations, but I just think those things don't matter that much.
Yes, a person can be sincere, not have any false or devious motivations, but just be wrong. Right, Mike? Someone can look at the prophecies in the Old Testament and see them as God really predicting the future. They can be sincere in that belief, but just plain wrong. And maybe the authors themselves who wrote the parts of the Bible, they could have truly believed this and been sincere and took what they've known about the world around them and applied it to God and saying that this God predicted this, when really it was just themselves seeing the world around them and thinking God was telling them this is what will happen, but really it was just their own brain figuring things out. Okay, this is where I'm going to now move from agreeing with Mike to chastising Mike. I seem to remember interviewing Mike Winger a long time ago. And actually, hey, Josh, if you want to join me and we can just talk about this a little bit, go to up here on your browser. And I think I should see you if you come in, and you can come in. But I seem to remember talking to Mike a long time ago or watching one of his videos or something like that. And him bringing up a prophecy called the prophecy of Tyre, and saying that this is one of the best prophecies. I think he said it's one of the best prophecies in the Old Testament. And just like this guy at Remnant Radio saying, I scoured 80 hours looking for prophecies, and here's one of the best, that Mike destroyed. Mike said, no, this is not a prophecy. He said, this is not a prophecy because this is the common knowledge of the day. Anybody could see this coming. Anybody could figure this out. And yet here we have a guy like Mike talking about this very important city called Tyre and predicting, or saying God predicted that it would be destroyed. Mike, if you can take your deeply held beliefs and put it on a shelf and just apply what you said about this prophet named Gaul and apply it to what you read in Ezekiel, can you not see that this is the same thing? That when you have very important port cities and so forth, and leaders who want it, that they will be attacked. And remember with Gaul, you could actually research and find out the exact date of this common knowledge of what's happening in the world around, and then see that the prophecy is exactly, what did you say, 14 days later? Now, this is really hard to do for 3,000 years ago, right? But if you just listen to the experts in the Old Testament, they would say that this prophecy was written around the time when it actually happened. In other words, it was very close to the event. The prophecy and the event, very close. So even if a person did write that Tyre would be destroyed, that God is telling him that the Tyre is going to be wiped out by Nebuchadnezzar, even if it was beforehand, the writing was probably on the wall. Just like if you were a person predicting a year or two before Iraq was invaded by the United States and its allies, you could see that coming. You didn't have to wait for that to happen. You could say, yeah, I prophesied that George W. Bush and his allies, the many nations with George W. Bush, even the Canadians, my homeland, not a big prophecy. It's like, yeah, that's probably going to happen. Saddam's days are numbered. Not one stone will be left, right? Now, why can't Mike apply this type of reasoning to this great prophecy of Tyre, which still exists today, by the way? Why does he feel the need to reinterpret this prophecy of many nations and not view it as Nebuchadnezzar, just like George W. Bush, leading a coalition against Tyre, but rather say something like, well, even though it sort of got fulfilled. Oh, here's Josh. He can explain this much better than me, but It just boggles my mind. Well, no, it doesn't boggle my mind. Yeah, it is Dr. Josh. Can you hear me, Josh? I can hear you, I think. You got to turn off.
Can you hear me?
Yep, you're on. Do you want to show your face or just hear your melodic voice?
I probably better do it this way.
Okay.
How you doing, Doug?
I'd say I'm about 8 3/4 today.
That's good. That's good.
So were you indeed smiling, or did you just make me look like a real prophet?
Oh no, it definitely was. And I think right from the beginning, I kind of had the idea you were going to Ezekiel because it just sounds. It's highly ironic, I guess, is what I would say about it.
Yeah. Before we get into the details, why do you think Mike can't see how perfectly he trashed this prophecy with this guy named Gaul? Why do you think he can't see it with Tyre?
I did a stream, I think yesterday, with Nathan, and we talked a lot about what kind of presuppositions you come in, or how you begin with conclusions, theological conclusions, when you create a particular interpretive framework. And I think, as you see all the time when you interact with people like this, I think it's where he starts. And when you begin by thinking, well, prophecy, in order for my my overall theological viewpoint to be coherent, prophecy has to be 100%. And so because your viewpoint is correct, well then prophecy, however you've got to make it work, whatever possibility you have to find, be it in Ezekiel 26 or the book of Daniel or anything else, it's got to fit together, it's got to work. And so if you can just find a possibility, that's all you really need.
Yeah, and the reason why it got to have to work is because I think for Mike Winger's version of Christianity, because if it doesn't, it becomes a house of cards.
Yeah.
And
that's how it was for me, because so much. So I think I was very much like Mike is now, where you can very clearly see, modern prophets, as people that are just out for money, but because this ancient text is actually the word of God, then however unlikely it is that a prophecy would have come true, it must have, because it's part of the inerrant text. So,
for those of you who came late, this is Dr. Josh Bowen, PhD in what?
Assyriology, with a minor in Hebrew Bible.
Okay. So, some people were asking live stream chat, who is this guy you're talking to? Now, Mike's main point with trashing Gaul, I'm using the word trash just for fun because it's fun. But his main thing was, number one, this was common day knowledge at the time about this, the whole Supreme Court justice leaving and so forth, and that they would be replaced by probably a woman. And number two, that the prophecy wasn't quite right. He said that it would happen the second term. It actually happened the first term. Can you give two examples with Tyre that fit that motif to a T?
Yeah, sure. I mean, Ezekiel says it himself. That the reason that the prophecy is coming against them, God's bringing judgment against them, is because they watched Jerusalem fall. And said, that the gates of the peoples has been opened unto me, and sort of took joy in Jerusalem's downfall, being sacked by Nebuchadnezzar. And so he says, well, your turn's coming. And it's it's in all likelihood Ezekiel's just watching Nebuchadnezzar's army do its thing, and of course, we know from history, if you go back into the New Assyrian Empire back in the 8th and 7th centuries, we know that when Mesopotamian armies, the Assyrians and then later the Babylonians, when they went down to fight against Egypt, if you think about the geography, they had to go through the Levant. You know, they had to go through Lebanon and modern day Israel and come down. And the last thing that you wanted to do with a place like Tyre along the coast, or really any of those, you know, powerful cities, is leave them, you know, leave your back, you know, your rear flank or whatever exposed to them. And so what you would do is, as you went down, you would either conquer them or just, you know, show up in force and make sure that they're not going to do anything silly with threats of violence, and then you can continue south. So, you know, this was the natural thing that kings had done long before. Sargon II, Sennacherib, Esarhaddon, and Ashurbanipal, they'd all come and either laid siege directly to Tyre or cut off, you know, with a blockade, cut off the mainland from the island city, you know, to sort of starve them out. So, you know, nothing surprising here. This is what Ezekiel would have perhaps even watched happening.
Wasn't Ezekiel written way, way long before it actually happened, though?
No. No. The prophecy probably is written in 585. So Jerusalem fell in, you know, 587, 586. Prophecy is written in 585 in chapter 26. And, you know, things that you would expect to have happen, and I'm pulling this from memory here, so forgive me, but you know, one of the things that Ezekiel says first that's going to happen is, you know, Nebuchadnezzar is going to ravage the mainland cities. Well, there were the way that the island of Tyre sort of functioned is it receives supplies, water and wood and, you know, other things from the mainland. And there was a city called Ushu that primarily supplied that stuff. There was a natural spring there. And so, you know, what kings would do is they would conquer the mainland cities and create a blockade along the shore to cut off those supplies from the island. So now, you know, the island's got to figure out how to get water, you know, how to get food. And so, you know, Ezekiel prophesies, quote unquote, prophesies that that's going to happen. And but watching what had happened with Jerusalem, I think it was natural for Ezekiel to think, well, other kings haven't been able to do it, but Nebuchadnezzar is going to come and kick some ass. And he's powerful, and he's really going to be able to do this. And so he prophesies that the city's going to be scraped clean, scraped bare. And the word Tyre means like rock or flint. And so there's some wordplay there. You know, it's going to be scraped completely bare, down to bare rock.
And was it?
No, of course not. And what's interesting, I think most interesting about it, and Doug, I will continue to ramble on, so just tell me to shut up whenever. But what's most interesting is that not only do we know from historical sources outside of the Bible, not that we have a lot of them, but we have some, that Tyre wasn't taken. I mean, other than the fact that it's, you know, still there. Taken and destroyed. But Ezekiel himself, 15 years later in chapter 29, writes like an amendment prophecy and says, probably in the year 571, he writes, Nebuchadnezzar worked really hard, you know, labored hard against Tyre, and every head was made bald and every shoulder was rubbed raw, you know, probably from carrying siege baskets. But Nebuchadnezzar and his army had no pay, no reward from Tyre. And so God's going to give him Egypt instead, which also failed to happen. But, you know, it's not just extra biblical sources that tell us that prophecy failed. Ezekiel himself.
So is there any difference between the guy named Gaul in this video I just played that Mike Winger trashed and the author of Ezekiel when it comes to Tyre?
No, I can see very little difference. I know Mike was sort of hesitant to say it, but I suspect that Ezekiel really believed what he was saying. Of course, it's hard to know that sort of thing, but whereas this guy seems kind of like a, you know, bit of a dishonest human being. But
well, you know, because I work for Satan and I get access to the sound waves of Christians' thoughts.
Right.
There's some Christians thinking right now, but this is Old Testament stuff. We have much better prophecies that Jesus himself foretold. Now, can we apply how Mike trashed this Gaul guy with that prophecy and apply it to Jesus in some way?
Sure. I mean, sort of leaving my field of expertise, getting into the New Testament, but I mean, clearly looking at passages like Matthew 24, or prophecy about the temple being destroyed, those sorts of things. I mean, it's not like the gospel writers would have been, even if Mark, for example, were written pre-70. I mean, it's not like that writing wasn't on the proverbial wall. But Jesus making these types of statements. I mean, he really believed. Paul really believed in 1 Thessalonians 4. God's coming back. Jesus is coming back. And so, but it's looking around and taking in the context of what's going on and saying, well, obviously, this is just a small hiatus. This is just a very brief period of time. It's the same thing that you see in the book of Daniel, particularly toward the end, where chapters 10 and 11, Daniel's telling the people, essentially hang on just a little bit longer, because God's getting ready to break through the clouds, right? And to rescue, if he can just stand fast, stand firm just a little bit longer, it's almost over. I mean, this is the message of apocalypticism. So yeah, I think there's a lot of connections there.
Hang on, I'm getting some more information. Yeah, there's a Christian wondering about prophecies of like his hands and feet will be pierced. It says that in the Psalms, and also the final words of Jesus was predicted. I remember when Mike Winger was trashing the Skull guy, his prophecy, Mike made the most amazing, wonderful statement. And he said, listen very closely to the prophecy and try to hear what's actually is being said that will happen in the future tense. Are these...
Doug, I think I've lost you.
Oh, you lost me?
Sorry.
I can hear you. I can hear you.
Oh, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Damn it, why can't I hear you?
Can everybody else hear me? Hang on.
Let me leave and come back in. Hang on.
Okay. In fact, I wonder if... no, I won't try to find that part. But Mike Winger very clearly said that you have to listen for the future prediction. And if you read... In fact, I'm going to bring that up. Like one of the Christians' favorites is Isaiah 53. Here's a challenge to Christians. Read Isaiah 53 and take Mike's advice and actually look for the predictions. So here's Isaiah 53 up right now. And if we just take Mike's advice, I'll just, at random, let's see here. He was, past tense, treated badly, but he never protested, past tense. He said nothing, like a lamb. He was, past tense. Remember Mike said, really listen carefully for the future predictions. There is none here. This is Isaiah 53. But the Lord was, hang on, let me scroll down. But the Lord was pleased, past tense, who suffered such pain, past tense. Even after giving himself an offering for sin, he will see his descendants enjoy a long life. Did Jesus enjoy a long life? Okay, I think he's back. You're back. Can you hear me now? I can hear you.
Oh, okay, I got you.
Okay.
Sorry about that. I think somebody called me and threw the whole thing off on my phone.
That's all right. So I was just going through where you got cut off. I was saying that Mike Winger gave excellent advice to really listen carefully to the prophecy and find what nuggets are actually predicting the future. And then I went through Isaiah 53 when you were gone and showing how much of it's past tense.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we can say the same thing about other messianic prophecies, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think that passages like you referred to Psalm 22, with the hands and feet. Psalm 22 in and of itself, is a very complicated passage, and actually that particular verse has a lot of textual, from a textual criticism standpoint, is actually kind of complicated. There's an article written, I think, 2005, where I think it's the last one I saw that went through it in some detail. So, but even if you have any type of clarity there on hands and feet, I don't think that you do. Piercing in Hebrew doesn't necessarily have to do with this type of piercing that we see in crucifixion. Being pierced is often being like killed, like a sword going through someone. In the torso or something to kill them. That's how it's used. But nonetheless, I think that it's so much easier to recognize people utilizing prophecy, quote unquote prophecy, after the fact, to try to recognize, this must have been what this was talking about. And I think we see this sort of thing actually very clearly. I keep going to Daniel, but Daniel's such a good example of it. In Daniel chapter 9, where it talks about the 70 weeks, if you remember that passage, and of course people try to use that. There was a guy named Sir Robert Anderson that tried to, make that connection all the way down to like the very day that Jesus rode in on a donkey. And I mean, it's just. But what's interesting about it is Daniel is one of the earliest to interpret an earlier passage from Leviticus 26 and from Jeremiah 25, tying these things together to try to say, actually, what this meant. If you read through Leviticus 26, for example, it talks about, if Israel sins, then God will punish them. And if they keep sinning, he'll punish them 7 times more for their sins. Well, they take that the author of Daniel takes that principle and goes to a passage, Jeremiah 25, that talks about how Israel is going to be in the Babylonian captivity for 70 years, which is sort of a round number that had significance in and of itself. But when that came and went, the author of Daniel looks back and says, wait a minute, it must be that God punished us 7 times more for our sins. And so 70 years times 7 must be this 490 years. And so it's this early interpretation, but reading back into these earlier texts, and it looks so convincing, of course, later when you can fine tune it to fit your current circumstance. So
Hey, Worldview Detective in the live stream chat, I thought asked a great question. What would a prophecy have to look? What would it have to look like in the Old Testament for you personally, for you to consider it a divine prophecy?
That's a good question.
Yeah, it's a hard question.
It's tough for me because prophecy is, it's not something that's restricted to the Hebrew Bible. It's not something that's just shows up in the Old Testament. You see it in the rest of the ancient Near East. So there are prophecies that seem very specific in ancient Near Eastern texts, but we recognize them, and I think Christians would recognize them to be written after the fact. Looking back in response to something. I mean, I guess if I had to guess at it, I would say we'd have to have specific names, specific dates, and things that aren't, something that would be very surprising, and against the grain, something not anticipated at all. Even so, it would still be difficult for me, but I think that would go much further.
Here's my answer to that. which is similar to yours, but I'll be even more specific. If Isaiah 53 said that a guy named Jesus would be born from a woman named Mary and a guy named Joseph in this certain town, and will be a God incarnate, a part of a Trinity, and will die a death of crucifixion, will stick around for 40 days, and then ascend into heaven. That's better than what we got now in Isaiah 53.
Yeah, no doubt. No doubt.
Now, someone could actually try to manufacture that, but and was crucified by a guy named Pilate. But that would be really tough, I think, to fulfill, for humans to fulfill.
Doug, something that stood out to me listening to Mike talk about this was he made mention of there came a certain point where the guy Gall was actually making like a bona fide prediction that he got wrong.
Yes.
There was something about it, I don't remember what it was, but we have examples of that. So in the book of Daniel, if you go to chapter 11, the interesting thing about the book of Daniel is that all the prophecy, quote unquote, about it, that talks about the history that was going to come soon after the time that Daniel was supposed to be writing, all that stuff is very vague, and it actually gets several details wrong. But when you skip forward down to the 2nd century, when, of course, we scholars are all in consensus agreement that that's when the book was actually put together. But from Daniel's, the way the book sets it up, it's supposed to be several hundred years later. All the details of the 2nd century, I mean, everything gets much more detailed. It's not just this kingdom will reign. It's this king will go south and he'll fight against this person, and this person will do this, one specific thing, and then he'll go back to the north and there'll be this intrigue and blah, blah, blah. But what's interesting about it is all those details are perfectly in line with what we know happened historically until, and I don't remember what verse it is. It's something like 39 or something. But there's a verse where it's like the writer of Daniel actually kind of goes into a bona fide prophecy, and all that stuff afterwards is wrong. like that, all that stuff didn't happen. And so that allows scholars to say, okay, most likely this was written in the summer of like 167 or 165. I can't remember precisely, but that's the sort of thing that that's not new. That's not something that we just picked up in the last 6 months. It's been around for 100 years or more.
Is there a New Testament equivalent to that?
I mean, I'd have to think about it because we're moving out of my field.
Like I'm thinking of surely no one in this generation will.
Yeah.
Well, standing here, they'll see the kingdom of heaven. There'll be some here.
Yeah.
It's like they saw the writing on the wall with the temple destruction, but then they were kind of prophesying that Jesus would return. Or that Jesus, that someone will live in that generation before, and Jesus will return to get his kingdom.
Yeah.
But then it didn't happen.
And that was, I think I mentioned that a little earlier, but that was Paul's whole point there in 1 Thessalonians 4. Like, we who are alive and remain will be caught up together with them in the clouds. Paul, writing, as early as he did, is anticipating that he's going to be among that group. Raptured into the air, and yeah, I mean, like I know people try to spin out of this generation will not pass away and trying to say that that's like the transfiguration, but it's not tenable. The way that the places that it's constructed in the Gospels that it's the transfiguration, it's definitely, and it's consensus scholarship talking about the second coming and how it didn't happen.
If there's so many false prophecies in the New Testament and Old Testament, why did the authors or later authors leave it in?
I think because there was theological rationale that was developed. I mean, I think it's hard take what the tradition is that's so well established. And again, I'm not a New Testament scholar, I'm Old Testament scholar, but I mean, I think it's so difficult to take a tradition that's so well established and to disregard it. You know, instead, I think what they did is they made theological adjustments. Certainly, that's what Paul did. You know, looking at what he expected the Messiah to be, and then seeing what actually did transpire. You know, being able to sort of, I don't want to say on the fly, but you know, look around and sort of piece this together and say, well, actually, you know, the Messiah had to die, and here's the rationale for that. And I think this is why you get, what is it in 2 Peter 3? Forgive me if I'm getting that wrong, but you know, where he says, don't think that God is slack, you know, that he's lazy, falling down on the job because he hasn't come back yet. You know, a day is, you know, with the Lord is 1,000 years, and 1,000 years is a day. And people were saying this about the flood, you know, and so I think, but again, I think that's a response to this delay. I think it's a response to things not being fulfilled as they clearly were supposed to.
We got a few questions here. So very quickly, is there past, and Douglas Wise asks, is there past and present and future tenses in Hebrew?
So tense, it's not really what Hebrew does. You have a perfect and an imperfect, and like linguistically, they're called aspects. Yes, I guess is the simple answer. You have a past tense. Usually a perfect verb will be past tense. An imperfect verb will be either present or future tense. It's not quite that cut and dry. But yeah, I mean, generally that's how it works.
Okay. And thank you for the donation, Tart. Dr. Josh, let's hear the Old Testament rap song. Did you write a rap song?
I did. It wasn't an Old Testament one. Just, you know, sort of laying the groundwork here, because I humiliated myself quite publicly with it. But Megan and I on Digital Hammurabi were trying to make resources available for like middle school and maybe even high school, but probably middle school teachers to, you know, teach Mesopotamian history or stuff like that, utilizing our videos. And so I did this Gilgamesh rap where I where I wrote and rapped out the story of Gilgamesh. And
can you give us a few bars or no?
Yeah, sure. Here's a little story about Gilgamesh with a hip-hop beat to keep it nice and fresh. But can this ancient story teach us something new? After all this time, are the lessons true? Let's take it back to where the story begins. Home of the Mesopotamians. Ruled by a king that was part divine. The people of Uruk fell in line. Okay, how about...
Yeah, excellent. I've never heard that before.
Yeah, I'm surprised. You know, shocked actually that you haven't heard my Gilgamesh rap.
Yeah, I'm sure it made it on the top 10 chart somewhere.
Somewhere.
Can you give very quickly, one specific example of what Daniel got wrong? So,
sure.
Someone asked that question.
Yeah. So, I'm trying to think of what would be. So in the early history, you know, the period where he's supposed to be the Neo-Babylonian period and the Persian period, you know, there are a lot of dates that he gets wrong, you know, saying that there was a siege of Jerusalem when there wasn't one, you know, calling Nebuchadnezzar the father of Belshazzar when we know that he wasn't, Nabonidus was. And of course, there are a lot of apologists sort of spins on that, where in, you know, Semitic languages, father can also mean grandfather and son can mean grandson. And so, you know, Nebuchadnezzar was Belshazzar's grandfather. Well, of course, we don't have any evidence of that. So you have to, you know, do some logistics and try to say that maybe Nebuchadnezzar had a daughter named Nitocris, and then Nitocris married Nabonidus. And so then, you know, through that, anyway, I actually am writing a book. You know, I wrote that book on slavery, and it was popular enough that I thought I'd write, like, I think I'm going to call it the Atheist Handbook to the Old Testament. And one of the chapters, it's just going to be a resource for atheists when they have these kind of discussions and debates. But one of the chapters is on the dating of Daniel. So I actually just wrote that chapter. And part of the issue is that while apologists can come to, there's a guy named Tremper Longman, if you've ever heard of him. And Tremper Longman's a good Old Testament scholar, ancient Near Eastern scholar, but he'll write up.
We lost you. If you can still hear me.
Sorry, can you still hear me?
Yeah, you're breaking up a little bit.
Somebody tried to call me.
You're popular.
But, yes, I'm at work, so
oh,
sorry. I just decided to take my lunch. No, I decided to take my lunch break now. So, he would say that he has theological commitments where he says, I know that the overwhelming consensus in biblical scholarship is that Daniel was written in the 2nd century after the fact, as a prophecy after the fact. But because of his theological commitments, even though he knows the evidence is very strong for a 2nd century writing, he holds to an earlier dating. And the reason that he does is he says, I think it's possible, right? Like in other words, with this whole Nebuchadnezzar being the father of Belshazzar, it's possible you can sort of, jump through some hoops and twist some things to say maybe it's possible. The problem is that what is likely and much clearer is that Nebuchadnezzar, if you go back and read through the book of Daniel, you see that the things that are attributed to Nebuchadnezzar are actually traditions that are about Belshazzar's actual father, Nabonidus. Nabonidus was this Neo-Babylonian king that kind of went crazy for 10 years and left Babylon. And those traditions got transferred somehow to Nebuchadnezzar. So like, if you remember, Nebuchadnezzar is the one that goes out into the field for 7 years, I think. And, I think it's 7 years, and he gets, long hair, and he's like an animal. And then he comes to his senses. Well, we have an inscription that equates that's talking about Nabonidus, not Nebuchadnezzar. And so while you can sort of turn these things and twist these things to make them fit, they actually fit really, really nicely with a 2nd century date. So,
okay. I hope that answers.
That
I forget his name. His question. Chen asks, you were a former Christian, Trinitarian Christian for many, many years, right?
Yeah, about 25.
With your knowledge of the Old Testament, how did you consolidate the kinder, gentler Jesus of the New Testament with the warrior God, Jesus in the Old Testament? How did you do that?
Cognitive dissonance, maybe. I didn't really do a lot of thinking about, how do I say that? I guess because I knew that God was, wholly love, but also wholly just. And, the narrative of the Hebrew Bible is that all of the nations around and, all of the people, like in Genesis 6, they're all wicked continually, right? So they have to be judged, right? They have to be wiped out by a flood. And because God is perfectly holy, anything that he does, from that theological viewpoint, is absolutely moral and just. God can't make mistakes. So, showing his wrath, it to me was him showing his wrath upon incredibly wicked people. Now, the problem, of course, is that it's not actually what we see historically. And when you think about it, of course, I'm not a philosopher, but having come out of that now, there are a lot of philosophical problems, with that, and I think moral issues as well. But that's how I did it.
Yeah,
it's just.
I think that's
not really thinking about it too much.
Yeah, that's similar, I think, to how I did it as well. But it brings up these really huge tensions of, picturing Jesus who would have a child on his lap, let the children come to me, and then just a couple thousand years earlier, or 1,000 years earlier, he was drowning them. It's like,
yeah.
But yeah, what if you were to give advice to Mike, knowing that you and I agree with him so greatly with how he trounced this false prophet? What advice would you give Mike?
Well, I think I think the rationale behind it is, evaluate the rationale, because I mean, I think, knowing that I was in his shoes, and held his theological viewpoint, um, he's starting with the conclusion that that guy is a false prophet. I mean, we don't have those types of prophecies today. I would imagine, I don't know Mike, he might be Pentecostal, I'm not sure, but I would wager that he doesn't think that. Well, I don't know. Maybe I shouldn't assume that. Maybe he does believe that those types of prophecies can happen today. But it seemed like he was coming at it from the perspective initially. Well, this guy can't be a true prophet, right? And so then finding ways to validate that. I think the difference is that, and it's a little, being on this side of being out of Christianity now, it's a little frightening to watch people do this, and it makes sense, but it's now a little disconcerting. You start with the conclusion that Ezekiel 26 has to be true, has to be. And I think in the same way that if I had started with this guy Gall's prophecy, in the same way, I had a debate a couple years ago on the Non Sequitur show with a guy that was part of the cult, the Lord Rael cult. And they use, I think it's gematria, they use letters in the Hebrew that line up, with each other. Anyway, I went into that debate knowing that guy was not crazy, but, he's making shit up. And so it was very easy for me to then say, okay, well, this doesn't jive and this doesn't make sense. And, but if I went into that believing that guy to be correct, that to be a legitimate prophecy, I think it'd be much, much easier, dangerously easier, for me to find justifications that support it. And I think that's what we have happening in these passages like Isaiah 53 and Psalm 22, and especially in something like Ezekiel 26. I mean, last thing I'll say about it, even what theologians do today, because the majority of theologians today, and of course consensus among biblical scholars, is that Ezekiel's prophecy failed on its face. Like, the way that he said it was going to happen didn't happen. Everybody agrees with that. What people will say is, what theologians will say, like Robert Chisholm or Chris Udd or some of these other people, is they will say, well, prophecy is contingent, for example, and in the way that when Jonah went to Nineveh and prophesied against it, 40 days and Nineveh's going to fall, that when Nineveh repented, God repented, and so prophecy was contingent, and it is inherently contingent in that sense. So, they make the statement, Robert Chisholm draws the conclusion that, well, we don't know how, but, the king of Tyre must have repented in some way. And then, sort of as an afterthought, he says, and we know that Egypt also didn't, fall the way that it was supposed to in Ezekiel 29, but Egypt must have somehow repented as well. The Pharaoh must have repented as well. And again, it's starting from the conclusion that it all has to be divinely inspired, and God has to be behind what happened exactly in the way that it happened. And so when you start from that, you can really construct, I think, anything theologically to make it make sense. I mean, I think the Trinity is a perfect example of that.
Yeah. Yeah, I often get accused of psychologizing people, but I truly believe that in order to do exactly what you said, instead of starting with a conclusion, just look at it objectively and then build up from there. Though, in my opinion, the only way you can do that as a Christian, or at least Mike Winger's version of Christianity, is you have to let go of your love for Jesus. You have to let go of this being your hope, meaning, and purpose for eternal life. You have to let that go. And if you can let it go of that for about an hour, and then listen to you on the prophecy of Tyre, listen to you on other prophecies and why they might not be real prophecies, then I think slowly you can chip away at their confidence that this is actually having anything to do with a divine being that can predict the future. But that's really tough. I don't even know if it's possible, but it's possible because I did it. And you did it.
Yeah.
But
I think, for me, it took I mean, I know I've said this before, Doug, to you, but I mean, I left Christianity kicking and screaming, and I don't think that's unique in any way. But I went through grad school and got my master's in theology and wrote my thesis on Hebrew stuff, and then got to Johns Hopkins, and it was like, here I am reading these, the actual ancient flood stories, right? Where Genesis 6 through 9 got its flood story from. I'm reading it in Akkadian, I'm reading it in Sumerian, from 1,000 or 1,200 years earlier, and going, whoa, like this. How do I reconcile this? And then being confronted with archaeological and historical problems that show up in the biblical text over and over and over again. That I really just got to the point. I remember sitting down with a friend of mine. We had pizza every Thursday night up in Baltimore, and I remember he was a friend of mine from seminary, strong evangelical Christian. And I remember just one night I said, "Mari, it's no good. It's no good. I can't hold on to this anymore." And I think sometimes it takes something like that. I mean, you know that better than anybody. You interact with people like this all the time. So,
do you think what we're doing, or at least especially what I'm doing, is bad? Like, if someone is going to kick and scream and just feel sad the rest of their life because they've lost this belief, versus having this hope, meaning, and purpose, but believing in a false thing, what's better?
Yeah, I mean, I guess what I'll say about that is, let's assume for a second that Christianity is true, and that Jesus Christ did come and pay the penalty for our sin, and he has a plan for each one of us. I don't think that Doug Pinecreek can stop that, right? So if that's true, I don't think anything that you can do, is going to cause problems for the Holy Spirit. Now that,
well, I do have a pretty powerful boss.
That's true. That's true. But I mean, even he couldn't tempt Jesus, so, but I know that you could go to passages like, anybody leads these little ones astray, hang a millstone around their neck and everything. But I mean, I think that in reality, if we're thinking about this, rationally, who are you, Doug? Who am I, to be able to thwart God's plans? But I think at a more basic level, you and I are doing what we think to be right. And I don't know what else a deity could ask.
Yeah. Well, that's why I said a couple of live streams ago, I made the claim that only atheists go to heaven, because we're not coming at this. We're not starting at the conclusion and then building around it. We're looking at the evidence. At least you and me are going to heaven.
Yes. Well, we are the pure. We are the pure ones. We have no presupposition.
We're the true atheists. Oh, by the way, Satan's in the corner here. He's at all my live streams, and he overheard you say about that. Jesus defeated Satan with the temptations.
Yeah.
Satan, what did you want to say about that? He said that the Christians haven't heard his side of the story on that he was misquoted.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah,
that makes sense. The one thing that lets me sleep at night, though, is I have Raptor Jesus in my corner.
Yes.
I used to be on Skylar's show when he was still running things strong, and I remember Raptor Jesus is with the Skylar Fiction show. I mean, he called into the show one time.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and it was powerful. It's powerful. I wasn't there for that stream, which was really frustrating that I missed it. But yeah, he called in one time.
So you're just relying on the testimony of 2 or 3 who are gathered in Skylar Fiction's name?
You know what, though? I have faith. And I think that's what you need with Raptor Jesus, is you need to have faith in Skylar Fiction. And I mean, the reason that I know that it was true is he settled the whole Picard. See, I can't even remember the other guy's name.
Oh yeah, I know. What was Shatner?
Yeah, what was his
William?
Yeah, what was his character's name? Captain. Boy, that's terrible. I can't remember his character's name, but he settled that debate. Which one's better? He
Kirk.
said Picard.
Captain Kirk.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, he Raptor Jesus said in a low, grumbly voice, Picard. So that's how I know it's true.
I want to wrap this up by saying that for God, maybe you're the same way as me, but what would really increase my confidence in a divine entity that could prophesy here for planet Earth for us humans is, and we can try this right now or in the future, if there's a Christian listening, I want you to pray to God and ask for a 10-digit number that I will write down sometime in the future, maybe this week. Put it in a sealed envelope, date it, and sign it. Signing you seal it, and then you sign where you sealed it. And then come on my show. And then I will write a 10-digit number down, and you open the envelope and see if it matches with mine. Now some Christians are just going to shake their head and say that's a stupid type prophecy, but I'm being honest and sincere here. That would impress me, and I dare say impress Christians more than the Tyre prophecy, more than the Psalm 22 prophecy. I think they'd go, wow. And especially if we could do this once a year, have an annual event just for Yahweh to let his humanity, the humans, know that he's still there and still can have power. And then, of course, like the matches.
And I mean, certainly he's not above that, right? I mean, you look at Elijah and the 450 prophets of Baal. I mean,
yes,
go ahead, call down fire from the sky, burn up your sacrifice. And then he goes and he douses his sacrifice with water, and
you've seen me do that on my live stream, have you? This is why I have a pack of matches here. Whenever a Christian comes on, I say this would increase my confidence. If it's good enough for Elijah, it's good enough for Pinecreek. Pray in the name of Jesus.
That's a good point.
That these matches will just light on fire. In fact, this is an easier test than Elijah did because I'm not using water. I'm even starting with some chemicals. I'm helping God here.
Right.
But yeah, we're just going to be viewed as mocking now, right?
Yeah. Well, not the Raptor Jesus part though. That's real. That's honest.
Well, thanks so much for coming on, Josh.
Oh, thank you. No, I appreciate you having me. I appreciate the time.
This is the first time, right?
Yeah, it is. It was really good. I'm sorry I couldn't be on camera. You got my goofy ass picture up there, but that's okay.
No. Actually, there was some legitimate questions in the live stream chat asking if you were single, and don't worry, my moderators very quickly shut that down. Said no, he's happily married with children and so forth.
Believe me, they would retract that question if they got to know me. That's all.
Oh no, I doubt that. Actually, you have something in common with my sister, who's now passed on. How's your MS doing?
Yeah, it's okay. It's I'm starting to get some more stuff going down on my left side, but I'm on a pretty strong twice daily drug for the MS itself, and it's slowing it down, which is nice, but it sucks. But we're getting by.
Well, even though that's
appreciate you asking.
Even though it's good news for you that the medications are slowing the progression, it's part of me just cries on the inside when I hear you say that, because my sister refused to take those drugs. It's man. And you have kids and she had young kids, and because of modern science, medical science, you'll get to see, I have faith that you'll get to see your children walk down the aisle and get married someday and all these things. But because of my sister's faith, she threw that out the window, and it's just so heart-wrenching. It's
sorry.
Yeah. Why did I have to bring that up? That's a downer note, but it's real, right? That's what life is. Life's not always fun and games. It's it can be very painful. But yeah, thanks again for coming on. You can just hit the X and you're out of here.
All right. Thank you, Doug. Anytime you need me to come back, just let me know. Appreciate it.
Take care.
All right, boss. See ya.
Yeah, can we have a round of applause for Dr. Josh? Yeah, they're applauding for you, Josh. Oh, well, that was good. Let me bring Mike's face back up here. So yeah, Mike, my only advice for you is to listen back to your own words about this false prophecy and just try to apply that to things like Tyre Even try to apply it to Jesus' own words, according to the Gospels, that the temple would be destroyed. You're so close, Mike. You're so close. If you could just apply your reasoning in another area of your life, if you could just for a few minutes shelf your love for Jesus, shelf your hope, meaning, and purpose. I know that, in fact, here's an out that I give a lot of Christians. Don't shelf God. Keep this idea of God in your head. But for now, do a bottom-up approach and just, it's okay to doubt that Christianity is true. For the same reasons you doubt that this, what's his name, this Gaul guy is actually speaking anything from the Lord. It's okay to doubt that the New Testament authors are speaking anything from this God, or that even the Old Testament authors are speaking anything from a God. Just try to be consistent in your reasoning. But, you know, the problem is, my guess is, Mike, you're making more money than you ever have in your life right now with a successful YouTube channel. And now it's even an extra, it's tougher, right? To let go at this point. Ellen Bird says, it's liberating. Join the land of the free. There is freedom in not having as much cognitive dissonance. Yes, Douglas Wise, there's a lot of hurting people who follow Mike Winger. I would hate to see his inbox, his emails. Thanks for your questions, guys. Sorry we didn't get to all of them, but there were some really good questions there. Ed Luckenball hates this music, but this is exactly why I play it. I want to see your dedication to Pinecreek. As long as a man believes the Bible is infallible, that book is his master, says Challenge 3. Yeah, I tend to agree with that. But there are a lot of Christians who view the Bible much differently than Christians like Mike Winger. I've talked to many of them. Chris, you're the one who made me smile just now. Hello, Mexico. Jesus Reyes Lopez. I love your name. I have relatives in Mexico. There are Mennonite Mexicans with blonde hair who look like me. Well, not as good as me, but living in Chihuahua. My apologies to Mike Winger. He was scheduled to come on and defend himself, but we ran out of time.